Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about Nintendo Switch emulation with Ryujinx, or rather a fork of Ryujinx. Now, from my understanding, Nintendo did put an end to the main version of Ryujinx. However, Ryujinx was open source. From my understanding as well, nothing was ever taken to court and nothing was ever decided in court. So Nintendo doesn't really have a legal stance on Ryujinx as it stands right now, nothing that was proven in court. I could be wrong with that assumption, but at the same time here, there are a lot of Ryujinx forks out there that exist. And there's one here that just got a brand new update. So at the time of filming, version 1.2.80 is the latest version of Ryujinx. This one is a pretty significant update. There's a whole bunch of changes here, a whole bunch of fixes. There's an embedded compatibility list viewer, migration to .NET 9, the experimental metal backend, the ability to read-write Amiibo bin files, and even more. On top of that, in terms of game compatibility, it seems that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is booting. Now, if you are curious about this one, if you wanted to learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below. I don't hide my sources. And speaking about Nintendo Switch emulation, and I guess Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, next up we're talking about Sudachi, another Nintendo Switch emulator. And Sudachi has gotten a couple of updates. So as of version 1.0.12, it seems that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD has support now for Windows and Linux. And as of the latest version here, version 1.0.13, they've removed the ability to install games to the NAND for both Android and Windows. And speaking about Windows, next up we're talking about Windows emulation on Android with not win now, not win later, but WinPlay. And Xiaomi introduces WinPlay, which is enabling Windows gaming on Android tablets. It's a brand new app. Unfortunately, I don't know when this app is receiving a wider release. I don't know if it's going to be locked down to specific tablets or phones, and I honestly don't know if this one's going to be open or closed source. I'm assuming it's going to be closed source. But they say with WinPlay that people will be able to download games from Steam and GOG. In terms of overall performance, this one's pretty interesting. They say that GPU performance loss through WinPlay is only 2.9%, and it only uses an average of 8.3 watts. Now, I'm not certain if they're pushing it and using that in the average as well, or if that's just, I don't know, WinPlay booting and loading a couple of indie games or something. I honestly don't know. WinPlay is currently still in early-ish development. I mean, it's in beta right now. It's not released in full, and it's also restricted to the Pad 6s Pro. No time frame or anything like that just yet. Hopefully this sees a wider release and maybe more thorough testing with even more devices. And speaking about Windows emulation on Android and Steam, next up we're talking about Pluvia, which is a lightweight unofficial Steam client for Android, which is a combination of Steam and Emulator. And Pluvia just got a brand new update. So at the time of filming, version 1.2.0 is the latest update. There's some fixes, improvements, and brand new features. They've added library search functionality, per app container settings, default app container settings, and box 64 presets, and even more. Next up, we're talking about Sega Dreamcast emulation with Flycast, and Flycast continues to make improvements and leaps and bounds here, especially for online play. So if you take a look here with Flycast under the latest development build, which at the time of filming was released on January 17th, there's a brand new feature you may be interested in. The Flycast Reddit page has a lot of the details here. Again, like everything we talk about, link is in the description below. DCnet is here on Flycast. Play native online Dreamcast games with no extra setup. They're claiming that NAT or port forwarding is not required anymore. There's no network restrictions and it works very good even over your phone's network. As for what games are currently supported, we've got Ooga Booga, NFL 2K2, 2K1, NCAA 2K2, NBA 2K2, and 2K1, and a whole lot more. On top of that, it seems that the update to DCnet also works on Android, although with Android there may be a few more steps. Overall, I think this is a huge win for Dreamcast emulation and obviously Dreamcast online play. And on a side note here, it seems they are encouraging people to join their Discord if people are interested in joining online games. Next up, we're talking about Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS emulation on iOS with XONE, formerly XGBA. and it seems that XONE has been taken off the App Store and there's a little bit of controversy surrounding it. The developer behind this one says, "Sorry for taking so long to respond to this matter. I can't reveal much about it until Apple replies to me, but don't worry, even lose XONE, I am also urgently making a new emulator and users who have already purchased Plus do not need to buy it again. As for UNDS, this app made by a trader in my team who stole my code." I don't know what's going on over at the App Store. Apple sometimes seems very weird about this stuff. I mean, it seems they took down XONE, the more popular version, and kept up UNDS, the far less popular version. If they are the same emulator, I'm very surprised that Apple would take down the more popular one and keep up the one that was updated later and was apparently a copy. We'll have to wait and see here for the future of XONE, but worst case scenario, the developer will be releasing another updated one that's pretty much the same or possibly better, I guess. Next up, we're talking about Qualcomm, and it seems that all Snapdragon 8 Elite CPUs may not necessarily be the same. It's being reported that Qualcomm is shipping some Snapdragon 8 Elite CPUs that are a little bit different. They're a new, slower variant and missing a performance core. So this new variant is called the SM8753AB, and it's being reported that Qualcomm wants to use this in foldables like the OnePlus Open 2 and Galaxy Z Fold 7. And the reason being is that without that extra performance core, temperatures are a little bit lower. And it seems that performance is also going to be lower as a result, AnTuTu scores being 2% lower and Geekbench scores being 7% lower, but may not be lower overall if the phone isn't thermal throttling as much. I am curious to hear your thoughts on the matter, so let me know in the comments below what you think about this variant of the Snapdragon 8 Elite. Do you think it makes sense to remove that core to reduce temperatures at a slight cost of performance? And what do you think about the naming convention? Personally here, I don't mind what they're doing, but they shouldn't be calling it a Snapdragon 8 Elite. They should be calling it something like a Snapdragon 8 Elite Lite or Snapdragon 8 Elite Minus or something like that. I mean, calling it a Snapdragon 8 Elite, but it's not as elite as the other Elite is a little bit misleading and confusing. And speaking about performance, next up we're talking about the Geforce RTX 5090. And it's being reported that there's a 30% increase in overall performance compared to the 4090 in Blender. It is worth noting here because this may play into things. They're using different versions of Blender. So the RTX 5090D is reportedly 27.6% faster than the 4090, and the regular 5090 is 34% faster. Let me know your thoughts about that one and if this performance justifies the overall price increase of the 5090. Now, I don't know about you, and call me crazy here, but $2,000 or around there for a GPU is well out of my price bracket and what I'd be willing to pay. For this generation, I'm still Team B580. Yes, way lower performance, but at the same time, $250 provided you can actually get one is way cheaper than $2,000. I know some people may not agree with my approach to this, but I mean at the same time here, affordability and performance and trying to maximize the two makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I'm okay with turning down graphics if I need to. I don't need to play everything at 4K and, maximum FPS, maximum everything just to enjoy my experience. I mean, I'm okay with 16 and 8-bit and 32-bit graphics, so I don't really need to have everything maxed out. Either way here, I'm not even in the market for a GPU right now. I'm going to be holding on to my laptop, which has a 3060 in it, which to me is still kind of absolutely fine. And speaking of still kind of absolutely fine, next up we're talking about Hollow Knight Silksong. And someone asks, I just want to know if the game is progressing in its development or if the team has given up on the project. Please, I only need a yes, the game is real and someday it will release. And one of the people working on the game says, yes, the game is real, progressing, and will release. Unfortunately, we don't have a year after release. Unfortunately, I don't, and no one really does, has any more information about this game and when it's possibly going to release. Not even for what year they are targeting. We'll have to wait and see on this one moving forward. I mean, people have been incredibly patient so far for it, and I guess they're still going to have to be patient. Right now on Steam, there is no planned release date announced. And speaking about stuff being cancelled, next up we're talking about a Horizon Zero Dawn MMORPG that is being reported as cancelled. There are a couple of things worth pointing out. First and foremost, I think I just called it a Horizon Zero Dawn MMORPG, and I meant to say a Horizon series MMORPG. And it may not necessarily be a Horizon MMORPG, it's just being reported that Project H, which is the code name for the MMORPG based on Sony's Horizon franchise, has been cancelled. So Project H could, on an off chance, be something completely different. And on top of that, it appears that this Project H MMORPG is completely separate from the Horizon Online game that Guerrilla was working on. So I don't know if there was some redundancy or what exactly was happening behind the scenes, but it appears that the next Horizon Online game is still full steam ahead. And speaking about full steam ahead, next up we're talking about the exact opposite. So if you're a fan of EA Origin, I don't know who's a fan of it, but if you are a fan of EA Origin and you've got a 32-bit system, you're not going to like this news. EA is shutting down Origin. So this news comes right from their website. They say on April 17th, 2025, Origin will shut down as Microsoft has stopped supporting 32-bit software. If you use Origin, you'll need to upgrade to the EA app, which requires a 64-bit version of Windows. So if you've got a 32-bit machine, it seems like you're not going to be able to play EA games moving forward. For those worried about stats and stuff like in-game hours, it appears that in-game hours will transfer from Origin to the EA app, but they can't promise that mods will fully transfer over. There may be some incompatibilities. Next up here, we're talking about Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories, and it appears that a couple of prototype builds have been posted on Hidden Palace. Both prototypes are for the PSP, and notes on them right now are pretty thin. I'm assuming that the notes section will beef out as people dig into the prototypes and find out what is there and what's missing. And one is dated for July 26, 2005, and the other one is dated for September 1st, 2005. Next up here, we're talking about Super Smash Bros. Modding, and if you're a fan of modding Super Smash Bros., you may be interested in the direct they just had. And this one was on January 18th, and there's quite a bit of content in here. This direct lasted over an hour. Now, it's worth pointing out this is all unofficial stuff. This is not sanctioned by Nintendo, but this is really cool in my opinion. I mean, they've got new characters, new movesets, new stages, and even more. For example, May here from Guilty Gear Strive. This direct presentation is pretty awesome, and I would say the modding scene is on fire. If you mod Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below and what character you've modded in is your favorite. Next up here, if you're a fan of RTS games, where RTS stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or real-time strategy, depending on how you wanted to interpret that. Anyways, Steam is just having their first sale of 2025, and it's the Real-Time Strategy Fest. There appear to be a lot of great games for some really great prices, and I would say this is another great opportunity to pick up a bunch of games, maybe just a handful of games, maybe just a game or two, add it to your backlog and forget about it and never play it. I may be guilty of doing that from time to time. Next up, we're talking about a game that everybody has in some sort of backlog in some way, shape, or form, and that is Doom. I mean, if you've got a PDF file, chances are you've got Doom in your backlog for PDF games, because we talked about Doom being ported to a PDF file in a previous video. Well, anyways, it appears that nothing is going to stop people from porting Doom to even more things. Someone has ported Doom to Microsoft Word. No surprise here, there is no sound. It's probably not going to be the most optimal version of Doom, but at the same time, it's 100% free and open source. And last up here, we're talking about a game that's soon to hit Kickstarter, and that's called Cronelas Mansion. Now, this is a point-and-click adventure. The Kickstarter hasn't started just yet, but demos for games are now available. They say the demos for NES, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance are now available. Will you find the Easter egg on NES? And it is up on itch.io. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and the legendary one fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos, don't tempt fate, save your state.